Joining me now is Chris Martenson. Be sure to follow him. His website, peakprosperity.com, peakprosperity.com. And on X, he is at Chris Martenson on X, Martenson. We can talk about a lot of things with him, and we're going to do that right now. Chris, welcome back to the broadcast, our first interview for 2026. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. What an exciting time. Glad to be back. Has it only been 1 month into 2026?
I know, right? We've crammed a lot of activity into that first 30 some odd days. Let's talk about gold. Gold and silver are back up. They're around, silver is getting back up to around the 5,000 range. Silver, that's gold, is around the 5,000 range again, just under. Silver is around the $87 an ounce range. And yet we're seeing and hearing more and more talk that we're going to see the collapse of the dollar. Here's the latest pronouncement by Dr. Doom, as he's been known for years, but he sure seems to get a lot of it right. Let's look at what Peter Schiff has to say.
And the world is now pulling the rug out from under the U.S. The dollar is going to collapse. The dollar is going to be replaced by gold. Central banks are buying gold to back up their currencies. True. They're getting rid of dollars. They're getting rid of treasuries. We are headed for an economic crisis, again, that will make the 2008 financial crisis look like a Sunday school picnic. The biggest difference between the crisis that we're about to have and the one we had back then is this one is all in America. It's not going to be exported to the rest of the world. It's not a global financial crisis. It's an American financial crisis.
Wow, it's an American financial crisis. Okay, how much of this is being orchestrated by our dumb, stupid decade after decade, 100 years, 1913, so more than 100 years of stupidity on our part, right, with centralized bank. Andrew Jackson got rid of a central bank, said don't do this again, explained all the reasons why it was stupid and dangerous and theft and would destroy the country. We didn't listen. We got a central bank again in 1913. So how much of this is us? And then how much of it is also now taking advantage of us and our stupidity by foreign governments, BRICS and others, that are using this as economic warfare to collapse us from within. So kind of interesting. This is going to be pretty much isolated to America. We're going to collapse the dollar eventually. I don't know the time frame. You can tell me. But everybody else pretty much is going to go on. Some of that has to be, again, internal, but some of it has to be external, right?
So 90-10, 90% stupidity. You're looking at a old gold and silver bug. I started buying my first gold in 2001, silver same year. And just because I was looking at how the system was running, I read the book by G. Edward Griffin, Creature from Jekyll Island. It explained how money creation happened. I understand humans well enough, Brandon, to know that, I see where this is going. Now, it's taken a lot longer to unfold than I thought because the Federal Reserve has done unbelievable things in terms of printing money. We call it QE, all this fancy stuff, but they've done everything they can except do the right things, okay? And so if we really want to date where this broke, Nixon slams the gold window August 15th, 1971. 1973, they institute, and we know this from a cable that I have a copy of that went between London and New York, where they said, American citizens are going to start buying gold again legally in December of 73. How can we keep the price from telegraphing that they would prefer to have gold instead of dollars? It sends a bad signal. And they said, let's start this thing called futures trading. And we can implement such wild swings of volatility that people will lose interest in owning that asset class. Or we can clamp its price down long enough that people lose interest. They developed a paper market for gold and silver that they said, you know what, we can use this to nudge and control whether people invest in this or not, because they didn't want you and me having any sort of exposure to gold and silver. So that's what they did. They ran it beautifully. It ran for a long time. And in the case of silver, I've just really gone all in on silver and told my subscribers about that because of this one thing. For the last 6 years, we have been structurally in shortfall in silver. More industrial and investment demand than is coming out of mines, which means we're eating into stockpiles in the world. That you can't do that for 6 years in a row. This will be the 7th year in a row. And what's going to eventually happen is it's going to break those markets in the sense that we'll have a price in the U.S. for silver. We'll say whatever it is, it's 85 right now. Well, might be 50, might be 150. Won't matter. You won't be able to actually get any. We'll just say, here's a price, but you can't get any at that price. So that's not a market. A market is where supply and demand and price come together. The price is the clearing mechanism to make sure you always have some supply there for a given amount of demand. We have fake markets now, Brandon. They're totally disconnected from reality. And that's a self goal, right? And he's asked, how much is this, the bricks? 90% of that is us running financialized schemes and scams, letting the paper guys and gals in Wall Street run amok. And they now got too big for their britches. They sold a lot of silver they don't have, right? That's the essence of a futures market, right? You know this, right? Which is, I could sell you a 1 silver futures contract today on the market and you could buy it. It would be commit me to deliver to you 5,000 ounces of silver. But what if I don't have any silver at all? They don't care, right? But if I went on eBay, Brandon, and sold you a Lamborghini I didn't have, we'd know exactly what just happened. That's fraudulent. So we've actually taken fraudulent concepts and enshrined them into markets and said, oh, but this is legal and it's how it works.
Bingo.
Well, that's what's breaking.
And isn't that interesting? Because on radio today, 1 to 2 Central, I started out my radio program before I went to our reporter on the ground in Israel, stating that I had a conversation with 2 different people in the last 24 hours saying, do you realize there is hardly anything in our country at the local, state, or federal level that is not based on abstract fraud, undeniable, 100% abstract fraud. For instance, and I said, when your police detectives in your town are running around today investigating crimes, flashing their badge and asking questions, they may be, in fact, investigating something that needs to be investigated and then turned over to a prosecutor and actually prosecuted. But do these investigators know that their local government from which they derive a paycheck is likely one of the largest scams, Ponzi schemes, and criminal activity going on in the town? The biggest lawbreaker is actually likely the local government that employs them, from which they get their paycheck. And if you were to say to a local detective, I would like you to investigate what appears to be a fraudulent bond, school bond and other municipality bonds that fund schools and the fire department and the police department from which you derive your paycheck. And it's all based on a Ponzi scheme of inflating people's property tax, a property tax that is set by a central appraisal district that was created by the school board. So when the school board needs money, they say how much they need, and then their creation, the central, what is it called? The central appraisal district, wherever it's called, they'll go out and they deliver the appraisals, thus the property tax necessary to meet that number. And then they issue bonds, and they have to keep issuing bonds to keep making people whole who have interest on this first set of bonds. So they're chasing money after money to make good on the first promises, which is that not the very definition of a Ponzi scheme. And if you said this to your local police detectives, they would look at you like you're crazy, number one. And number two, they would show zero interest in looking into this because you really expect your police detectives to investigate the city that's their boss. So I said, at the end of the day, if everything Mitch Wexler has been telling us at mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD, we might want to put that on the screen. If everything he's saying is true, and it appears to be from the court briefings and everything else, there is hardly an institution from local, state, or federal government that isn't as criminal or more so than the very people they arrest and prosecute and throw in jail. And that includes the judges that sentence these people who derives his or her paycheck from this same criminal enterprise. And then you add in the child trafficking and the pedophiles. And when are the American people going to realize we have been financially raped? Our liberty stolen, our dollar stolen, our purchasing power stolen. And when are we, the people, going to finally rise up and realize we have the law on our side? We don't have to be lawless. We are the law. We're the law. Individuals coming together collectively to defend individual rights. We are the law. What man creates, man can alter or abolish. That means government, according to our organic documents. But the average American sits here not realizing even your local police department, which you may love, they are funded on a fraudulent scam. And if they found out about it, they wouldn't even investigate it. But yet they're on their moral high horse, flashing their badge and investigating people in your community, who, by the way, may need to be investigated and prosecuted. But the audacity, the moral high horse to investigate and put people in jail when the crimes being committed by the local government probably surpass the petty theft they're investigating.
By orders of magnitude. What did we just learn from the Somali daycare scandal, right? So now everybody's worried about the ICE riots and all that, but we found out that there are 49,000 NGOs operating in Minnesota alone. Every one of them with their fingers in some sort of like a Medicare scam, a daycare scam, most of them just involved in scams and frauds, right? And immediately, those should lead to handcuffs right away. These aren't even hard to investigate. I mean, this is probably for a decent FBI team, about a 10-minute investigation, right? And I haven't seen one person with their hands in handcuffs yet. And I got the sense it's not actually going to happen because what you're hearkening to, Brand, is so important. It's fraud all the way down. It's fraud at the very top. It's fraud all the way at the bottom. And the detective comes out to make sure that they catch the meaningless bit player to show that we're doing something about this. Look, we're fighting crime, right? But if the whole system is criminal, all you're really doing is putting window dressing on it, saying, look, we caught this guy who like had this fake eBay scam or something like that. But we're not, we're down to it. We're down to it. With these revelations, I got to tell you, I thought I was pretty radicalized knowing what I know about money creation and how fraudulent Wall Street is. But these Epstein revelations, right, about him and all of his buddies being caught up in everything from creating the pandemic, figuring out how to co-brand it, the next pandemic, so they could make trillions off of that. Watching that they were involved in selecting NATO people, watching that the Rothschild Bank was paying him $25 million for his risk algorithm, on and on and on. It's just, listen, if he was, obviously Epstein was involved in fraud, blackmail, probably, at least power brokering. And right now, the Assistant Attorney General of the U.S., Todd Blanche, is like shrugging, going, well, we think there's nobody we can really prosecute. Like, you haven't run an investigation yet. Follow the money. Why did Les Wexner give him tens of millions of dollars, a plane, and a house? Why did Leon Black of Apollo pay off all those 8 girls? Why did the Rothschild Bank give him $25 million? Where did the money come from? That's where any of these stories should start. And of course, they're not interested because you know the answer as well as I do, right? But that's filtered down all the way. And where it's going to hit everybody listening to this hardest is when you find out that possibly your local community, your local city, your local municipality has been running this fraud you just spoke of, where they spend money willy-nilly. The teacher salaries always go up by X%. They get this big stadium from somewhere, whatever the story is. And the way they pay for that is they jack up your property taxes, which is a tax on unrealized gains. It is completely antithetical to anything we should be thinking about. But it basically means you and I, we rent our houses from our local government. And so there really isn't, listen, we don't have freedom. We do not have the appearance of freedom at this point. That's what's coming true. And we have a 2-tier justice system. Obviously, those for them is different from those for us, on and on. So as we look through all of this, Brandon, I got to tell you, if I had a message for your listeners, it's you better brace for impact, because this is fourth turning stuff. When people lose the sense that that the social contract has been broken, well, then none of us have an obligation to live into that social contract anymore. And things get weird from that point in time. I can't tell you how many people, Brandon, I've talked to in the past month who said, why am I paying taxes? Mm-hmm. I don't understand. Because I'm paying them to pedophiles and Satanists. It doesn't feel right. Oh. And
doesn't feel right.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah, of course they are. And they're on social media talking about how they're done. They're not paying taxes anymore. And I don't know if that's going to come true or not. And you have the Deputy Attorney General saying this just the other night.
Some of the people we saw on camera at the rallies. Is there any chance that any of these individuals who partied with Epstein and engaged in relations with minors will be prosecuted? Any chance?
I'll never say no, and we will always investigate any evidence of misconduct. But as you know, it is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. And some of these men may have done horrible things. And if we have evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But it's also the kind of thing that the American people need to understand, that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. It isn't a crime to have
Didn't look like that's all that was going on some of those photos. I mean, if the photos could speak, some of them look pretty bad.
That's right. And unfortunately, photos can't speak. And so we need witnesses and we need
Are there
evidence
videotapes that you all have? Or well, some of the people?
Are there videotapes? I wish I'd like to hear the answer to that. Because apparently
Of course there's videotapes.
There is videotapes, right?
Of course there are. His whole house was wired up. We know that.
And I hear that what they have released to us is just is disturbing as it appears to be and is, depending on the pictures we're looking at, as disturbing as it is, this is unfortunately and sad, and it's not to minimize what's been released or to justify it in any way or to minimize it. But I am told that what hasn't been released would just blow the minds of Americans, that what we're seeing is kind of the benign stuff in comparison to what is the horrific stuff they do have. Is that true?
Yeah, what Todd Blanche just said there is completely unacceptable. He's like, well, if we had any evidence, well, let me tell the Department of Justice how to conduct an investigation, okay? You interview witnesses. There are all kinds of witnesses out there who said, hey, I've never been interviewed and I was raped by these guys at his properties. 2, you collect physical evidence, right? The FBI didn't even go to Little St. James Island and never went to his Zorro Ranch, ever, not once, to collect evidence, right? When they went into his brownstone, they actually called his lawyer and said, hey, there's some hard disks and things here. Do you want to get these before we collect them into evidence? And they went away, and the next day they were all gone, right? It's like, come on, right? This is just obviously they're not running an investigation. And of course, as I said, you also follow the money. So besides witnesses, physical evidence, videotapes, money, and you would actually, Todd Blanche, you would bring these people in and you'd put them under oath and you'd start asking them questions because that's how an investigation is done. Then he's shrugging. He's like, what are we going to do? We don't really have anything. I was like, because you haven't tried to gather anything, obviously. Now, the biggest smoking gun document, Brandon, I saw come out was that Bill Gates, right, who tried to slip antibiotics to his former wife because he got some STDs and brought him home. That's the guy we're taking health lessons from, apparently. He had made Jeffrey Epstein, through a memorandum of understanding, a legal document. He gave him power of attorney. He gave him complete freedom to run this global enterprise that he wanted to run. He gave him immunity, right? And also said that he would pay for any trouble that this guy got into. So listen, Brandon, you and I know each other. But if you ever came to me and said, hey, Chris, I want to indemnify you completely. And by the way, I'll pick up the tab for anything bad you do. Like I'd tell you, Brandon, you've lost your marbles. Nobody does that, right? Who does that, right? Out of all the people in the world, this billionaire decided this was the guy who's the right person. He's going to indemnify him. Come on. Listen, they're treating us like children. And that's part of this whole thing. This is obviously as bad as it appears. It's probably 10 times worse.
It's probably 10 times worse. And then you add the 145,000 children that Tom Homan says we just found, thankfully, unaccompanied minors. But why were we allowing all these children into the U.S.? And according to Tara Rodis with the whistleblower HHS, but on my show many times, they were giving them to people they knew these children didn't know. They knew these children didn't know them. And children were reportedly being abused and calling the hotline, which rarely, if ever, got answered. But why was our government knowingly allowing that? Does this not go to the behavior that's already being documented through the Epstein files of the behavior of the ruling class of America? So this is just par for the course, right?
Seems to be par for the course, unfortunately. And of course, there have been lots of cases throughout history in the past as well. Here in the United States, in Europe, other places. And so I think we're just sort of it's sort of being exposed now. And I think this is the power of X, right? If it wasn't for X, I wouldn't know any of this stuff. It's not on the New York Times. It's not on CNN. It's nowhere else to be seen, right? So, but now I'm actually reading the source documents and seeing, who's saying what and all this stuff. And it's bad, right? And they have their cute little things that they do with each other. They have these coded language. They talk about pizza and cheese and hot dogs and things, right?
And ordering appliances and whatnot at huge multi-$1,000 prices, apparently, right?
An $8,983 single item from Wayfair, which has this whole scandal behind it and all of that, right? So
I don't even know what all that means, but I saw the Twitter on it.
We can go into that in a bit if you want, but
no,
it's
we don't have to go into that.
story.
I'm just saying I heard it. I don't even know about what it means other than it seemed to be some kind of cover and code language that you're talking about.
Yeah, so somebody added it up and said, hey, how many times have you personally arranged an ice cream party or a pizza party by email with your friends? Like, I can think back to my whole life, probably 2, right? And Epstein did it hundreds of times, right? So they're really fascinated with like bad food, or it's something else. And it seems to be exactly what it appears
Coded
to be.
language.
So it's coded language. Right?
So let's get to this then. Back to Mitch, who has been pointing all this stuff out to us.
Yeah. Mitch is awesome, by the way.
And Mitch
solid.
is supposed to be on the program here in just a few minutes. Again, this, folks, is at mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD. This is said to be the school bond, the municipal bond fraud, Ponzi scheme is said to be $17 trillion. Now, you add that to the fact that the dollar's going down. Can you tell me, and I'm going to ask Mitch this too, can you tell me at what point do the derivatives, which I think 1 or 2 banks are holding derivatives equal to the global GDP, what causes eventually the derivatives to snap and become a weapon, financial weapon of mass destruction? I think is what Buffett called it at one time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then what causes these bonds to collapse? In other words, at what point do we see the average American completely wiped out from their bank to their bonds they've invested in at their local community, or bonds that have been put into their personal retirement accounts, pensions, IRAs, and the little people, mom and pop, average American, who worked hard, paid their taxes, had their dollars debased, their purchasing power stolen. Now they find themselves financially ruined, literally ruined, not even sure where they're going to get the money to pay for the next grocery run. Is that where we're headed? And what's it take with the dollar declining for this avalanche to finally break and mow people over and suffocate them?
Well, the actual trigger, we don't know. In retrospect, we'll say, oh, is the Archduke being shot, or some event, right? Well, that's what'll happen. But here's the thing. A derivative is a contract. That's all. It's an agreement. You and I could write a derivative contract. It'd be a stack of paper about this thick, a lot of words on it. And it says, oh, if the temperature next January is above 30 degrees, I owe you $1 billion. And if it's below 30 degrees, you owe me $1 billion. That would be a derivative. They're bets. Okay. And the main use of a derivative is usually an interest rate swap. So you think interest rates are going up. I think they're going down. Or it's a credit default swap. I've bought, like, I want to insure like a muni bond from Denton, Texas. Make sure Mitch tells you about that county. Or whatever. They're bets. And here's the thing, Brandon, it's an insurance policy in a sense. I'm saying, listen, I bought all these bonds from Denton, Texas, but I don't like them. So I'm going to insure them. And if they go bad, I collect. But who's on the other side of that? So because it's an insurance policy and it's run in what's called the OTC, it's over-the-counter market, right? It's between you and me. So here's the fun thing about insurance, particularly when it's underwritten by people or small firms or hedge funds or whatever. They work great unless you really need them. It's like if I was insuring Paradise, California last year and 2 houses burned down, probably going to be fine. But if the whole town burns down, it's not fine anymore, right? So derivatives work until they don't, meaning they're kind of calming. But if something snaps in the story, right? So the United States decides to bomb Iran and Iran somehow lands a missile on one of our carrier groups and sinks a ship. Something that really causes people to snap all of a sudden, that creates a situation where you can have the derivatives market suddenly go bidless, and all these people who thought they had insurance suddenly discover they have no insurance at all. And that's when the whole system freezes up, and that's when you get into this other topic called the Great Taking. But the whole system is basically very fragile right now. It was designed for low volatility, meaning things should never really do anything but stocks go up and to the right, bonds stay calm, everything stays calm. When things get more volatile, that's when all of a sudden all of these underlying assumptions people had break. And when they do, it's just how Hemingway went broke. Slowly, then all at once. I think that we had our first liquidity tremor January 26th. Just happened.
That was the bank. Was that the bank? Was that the bank that failed?
Yeah, that was too small. No, there was a moment right around 10 o'clock in the morning on the 26th. People talk about, they saw that was the first big plunge in gold and silver. So maybe you were talking about that, but stocks took a hit at the same time. The Japanese yen spiked, the dollar spiked, all the other currencies took a dive, and Bitcoin fell off hard. Put that pattern into a picture and it says something snapped in the market. I don't know who, but something snapped. But they put it back together for now. But remember, we saw Bear Stearns break in February of 2008. That was a tremor. And then, nothing really happened through that spring. But, by fall of 2008, the tremors were increasing and then things fell apart. So that's how I look at the markets. That's how I look at the world, is you have to track all those moving pieces at once. And listen, we had a financialized system of finance that said, and financialization, very simply, is making money with money. I don't make widgets, I don't make products, I don't improve any goods or services, but I make a lot of money with money. I'm a hedge fund, I'm private credit, whatever, all that stuff, right? So that whole system of financialization, that's what's actually at the end of its rope right now. And that's starting to have its little tremors. I think Japan is the place that this all gets started, but it's a personal guess. And that's why I'm a big advocate. People need to understand how the system of money has been put together, how it went off the rails for the last 30, 40 years, why it's probably at the end of its runway right now, so that you can figure out what you need to do. But it's the same stuff you've been talking about forever. Hard assets, gold, silver, real estate, things like that.
So when do you think, what is the time frame on this? Is this 2026, 2027? Do we push it out to 2028, election year?
It could be tonight, but I actually honestly think it happens over the next year and a half to 2 years.
Do we make it through the 2028 election?
I don't think so.
So this will collapse on Trump.
Yes, he's probably going to have a very bad midterm if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly. So we'll see, and then we'll have a fractured government, right? Even can you imagine Trump up against either both a Senate Democrat or a congressional Democrat-led House? That'd be a stalemate. Nothing would happen.
But you see the dollar go crashing before the end of his term if he fulfills his full term.
Well, what I actually see is the dollar, paradoxically, it's going to spike first and then crash. And the spike is because it has nothing to do with the dollar being great. It has to do with how many bets are out there that are denominated in dollars, how much leverage is out there, how much people have borrowed. So, quick example, the carry trade. I'm a U.S. hedge fund. I'm like, I'm going to get $100 million from my friends and family. I raise all of that. Then I go to a bank, prime broker, I don't know, Goldman, JP Morgan, somebody, and I say, hey, I'd like to lever this up 6x. So now I have $600 million. I go over to Japan. I can borrow it at, last year I could borrow at 1% or even 0.5%. Cool. So I have $600 million. I borrowed at 0.5%. I go over to, say, New Zealand, and they have bonds, government bonds trading at 5%. And so now I'm making 4.5% spread on $600 million. It's pretty tasty, right? So that's called the carry trade, because I'm carrying money from one location, a low cost location, to a high return location. And so that's the carry trade. It works great until it stops working, and then they have to reverse all of that. And so it's always kind of a slow build on the way in. Is more, every bank has done this. Every major bank I've looked into is part of this. And it's fine, and it develops over many years, if not decades, but then all of a sudden they don't like it anymore, and everybody tries to get out all at once. And it's a bad deal. So that's where we're at.
So what does it look like when this happens? When this happens, this also is going to bring down all the bonds as well, right? As the dollar declines, the bonds and the school districts and everybody's going to it's going to be a really big problem, right?
Yeah. So what happens is that, so let's imagine I'm this hedge fund. I've borrowed $500 million on top of the original $100 million. Now I need to pay that $500 million back. And it turns out I have a whole bunch of like New Zealand or Australian bonds in this story. What did I say? Maybe Australia, whatever I said. So I have $600 million of Australian bonds. I have to sell them. And then I got to scurry over to Japan and pay that borrowed money back. And then I got to take that back and pay off my prime broker, right? And by the way, when I have 100 million and I've borrowed 500 million more, if I lose 18%, I've lost 100% of my friends and family's money and everybody hates me. And so believe me, I'm going to be real motivated not to have that happen. So let's track this through. I have to sell the Australian bonds. So all of a sudden their yields start to go up. I take they pay me in Australian dollars because that's what they sell their bonds in. Like, I don't want those. I need yen. So I sell them. So their currency starts to go down. Now I buy the yen. It goes up in price, right? And then I come back over here and I have to dump the yen. And so the yen goes back down again and I bought dollars. So everybody tries to do that at once. It's very complicated and everybody can't do that at once. So what does it look like? We wake up one day and we find out that Nomura Bank in Japan has suddenly realized that it's like lent money that's never coming home again because they lent it to people who blew up in this carry trade. And so they don't know what to do. And the Japanese authorities, they shut their markets down just for a little while, mind you. They shut it on a Friday. We might open late Monday. They don't open on Monday. Next thing you know, because all our markets are cross-correlated, we find out that our markets start to go real haywire. Things start to get pretty janky. They shut our markets down just temporarily, just for today. Oh, it's tomorrow too. Oh no, there's some bank failures. This is how these things sort of progress. They start with a news event and they say, oh, it was Nomura Bank. That was what the problem was. That was the spark. And you say, no, it's 20 years of doing carry trades that maybe we shouldn't have done that with, right? And that was stupid. So that's actually the game. It's too many moving pieces, but it's going to break at some point because.
But go back to the school bond issue. That same scenario could be applied to the bond issue in your local community, right?
Well, so what happens when you get into a general liquidity event is you sell everything, right? We saw this in 2008. Gold got sold. It went down 35%, after things broke and then, carried on after that. But why did it sell off? Because if you get into this situation, Brandon, and you suddenly, your bets have turned against you, if you have it and you can sell it, you sell it. And so everything gets sold. That's why you see these market routes. Like, where did these trillions go that used to be in the stock market? They didn't go anywhere. It's just that suddenly there were a lot more sellers than buyers, and people sell what they can. And so everything gets sold. And so the school bonds will go bidless at some point, particularly if people figure out. And by the way, enormous lawsuits are going to come for fiduciaries that put munis in grandma's portfolio because they're safe. But these munis, with even minimal cursory investigation, which Mitch will take you through, you can prove these things are worthless. There's no chance they could ever pay them back.
And so that means that they don't get their pension check. They don't get their return on investment of the bonds. Money stops coming to them. They lose their money. They get nothing. And some people are counting on that money for their retirement and monthly bills. And so what you're talking about again is you wake up and the system is completely collapsed. What does America look like? It's like a financial, economic nuclear weapon has gone off. What's the fallout? What do the next 24 hours into the next multiple weeks look like for the average American, particularly the average American who is retired and has a pension and on a fixed income, and that was their livelihood for paying bills and groceries? What does life look like for the average American?
Well, speculation, but I'm pretty sure that would be the impetus for ushering us all into stable coins, right? So they're working on them. They've got the Genius Act, the Clarity Act. They're working on stable coins, which are they're little electronic pieces of code, each one of which would represent $1 backed by a treasury or a cash equivalent on the back end. If things really break and freeze and there's panic and oh no, and I can't pay my bills, and the government comes along and says, bad news, good news. Bad news, all your stocks and bonds seem to have gone to zero. Sorry. Good news, we're going to make you whole with these stablecoin things, and here you go, dollar for dollar. We've made you whole. If you pay attention to what just happened, I used to have ownership in things. So a bond and a stock gives me legal contractual rights of ownership over assets. When those go away and I'm replaced with a stablecoin's backed by debt, a U.S. Treasury bill. And so now all I have is like something I can spend. So the ownership goes away, but I think that's where we're headed.
And does that take a week or two to roll out, or are they preparing this transition so within 48 hours, everybody's back to the grocery store? How's that work?
Well, I think they're planning on that, but I submit to you it's not going to work. that easily. It just can't, right? Because I know people who can't figure out how to log into like a website that they've been to 20 times, right? I mean, it's just not everybody's. This requires you to have, technological savvy. It's going to be a whole new system, so it's going to be buggy as all get out, right? It's a government system, worse, so it's going to be really buggy. All of that, so I can't see it going that smoothly. I know they're going to try to do something, but if we were being smart, we would have multiple parallel currency systems, hard cash, maybe silver and gold or gold backs or something like that. We would have, maybe you could throw stable coins, but we would also have, you should have multiple things. So if one of them is not quite working, we're totally dependent on our single system. If it fails, it gets dark quick, right? Nothing functions.
So if you're not getting your paycheck, the police and sheriffs stop going to their job more than likely, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Most people go to the grocery store every 2 to 3 days. That's how they live. How are you going to buy stuff? I mean, at what point do you not have society break down with absolute pandemonium and lawlessness until the new system is rolled out and functional? I mean, that several weeks could be enough to end the country as we know it, unless you, I guess, roll out the military and implement martial law.
I don't think there's a chance in the world they could roll it out in a way that wouldn't result in a ding to everybody's living standards, right? We were here. The best they can do is roll it out, and we're here, and we hope we don't go all the way to there, right? That's the best they could do. The thing that's concerning, of course, is that, a lot of people who are in banking, who are in government, who are in this, they haven't had actually any business experience. I just did this thought experiment at my site with my subscribers today because they're asking the same questions. And so they said, well, what does this mean? They'll just roll out stable coins. And I said, okay, let's imagine I'm a procurement agent for Walmart. What do? I call up my Chinese person that I'm ordering from and I say, hey, I know we used to pay in dollars, but we have these things called stable coins now. My government tells me they're as good as a dollar. They just happen to be trackable, traceable, programmable. And by the way, my government can amend or rescind their utility at the flick of a switch. But don't worry, they're the same, right? I don't think that's going to be a good conversation because the currency, Brandon, that's actually the least important thing in a functioning economy. It's the agreements, the contracts, the understandings, the belief systems, the arrangements. That's the network of the system. And the currency is just the thing that sort of bounces across that. It's not the thing itself. Well, that's where we've gotten confused as a nation. We're like, oh, this thing, the money is the important thing. It's not important. The rest of it, it's the structure of it that's important, that delivers all of our goods and services, all of our productivity, all of our quality of life is all dependent on having a system that I honestly don't think a stable coin fixes. They're fixing the least important part of the issue.
Well, at this point, no one's going to trust contract law. They're not going to trust your local officials. Your local officials have been either knowingly involved in a massive Ponzi scheme to financially rape its own citizens, and many of them being elderly senior citizens, or they were too stupid to ask the questions that would have told them this was all a Ponzi scheme. And so you don't even trust your police department, your police chief, your sheriff deputies. You don't trust them anymore because your local prosecutors. Who do you trust anymore, right? You don't trust any of them. Your city council, your county commissioner, you don't trust any of them. You have no functioning government because no one trusts them. They were in on the take. They were all getting their paychecks on the back of this massive Ponzi scheme. You certainly don't trust your state government, and you certainly don't trust the federal government, which is, apparently run by people that like to molest children. And so as you understand, the whole system breaks down because the republic is all based on trust. Trust. The rule of law. My word is my bond, contract, a handshake. I do what I say I'm going to do. It's all based on that. That all starts breaking down, and you can't even replace the system fast enough or train people on how to get over to the new system, much less, as you said, get other people that even want to take it anymore. At that point, I don't know. I think you end up with a civil war. Is that going to be the tripping point of a civil war in America?
Well, there'll be a lot of very unhappy people, which is certainly one of the ingredients of a civil war like that, particularly people, I think, who live in cities are particularly exposed in this story because they're most dependent on food and fuel coming in 24 hours a day, right? And all the garbage.
And how long is it going to be
out
before gangs get control? You know, a mafia type group grows up and gets control of the distribution center and those things. And your police department is impotent against some of these folks.
Well, this is so important because
now you're talking about the Soviet Union and the rise of the Russian mafia type stuff, right?
Well, absolutely. And anytime you study a currency that's collapsed, like in Zimbabwe, for instance, it was a really tough 8-year period, warlords, all that stuff. And the people who survived and thrived had really good, tight social networks. And of course, that's sort of like my gang is strong enough that your gang thinks it's too much trouble to come to take what my gang has. Yeah, if you're all alone in this story, you're highly exposed in this story. And that's a problem. We live in a very high trust society that enables individuals to basically live all on their own without really deep social connections, right? And unfortunately, we've imported a lot of people from what are called low trust societies. That's Somalia, for instance, right? They come in here and they're like, I can't believe you're going to allow us to do what we're doing. And they just they're just like, wow, you guys don't understand that either I'm stealing from you or you're stealing from me. That's a low trust society, right? You can't have prosperity. You can't have a high living standard in a low trust society. It just doesn't work. So that's actually one of my main critiques of what the Democrats have done with their open borders is they have knowingly installed people from low trust societies into our high trust societies and then not just look the other way, but enabled them to run various grifts and scams and frauds as long as they got a little taste on the back end from that whole thing. You got to donate to the party or whatever the thing was. But that's the most corrosive thing you can do to wreck a society, ruin its currency, ruin its trust, ruin its sense of rule of law. All three of those are in play right now.
And I got an article before I let you go over at Front Page Mag. How many illegal alien cops are there anyway? Illegal foreign nationals are policing and wielding the power of life and death over Americans. Article by Daniel Greenfield talking about this, you know, from New Orleans to Maine, he says, to Illinois. Mm-hmm. Again, I just don't see how. I don't know the time frame, but it seems as though everything is in place for absolute society. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I want to be a realist. And I'm looking at all of the scams and the fraud, and that pretty much everything, even down to your local government, is based on massive fraud. And I'm like, when this collapses, how are you going to rebuild it when you, as you're saying, everything is really based on the idea of trust and a common agreement, a common compact among people that this is how we behave. This is what we allow. This is what we don't allow. This is what will happen to you if you do this. You know, it's kind of the Old West. Even if there's not a good sheriff in town, you know, the shopkeepers and the blacksmith and the preacher in town, you know, they'll take care of it. And they'll either take you out with a shot or hang you by the nearest tree. But the word is there is law and order here. There may not be a sheriff, but there is law and order because we, the people, have agreed our laws and our principles are this, right? And if you cross them, you're going to get either taken to the ice house and put there in chains until a judge can come through, or if we have to, we're going to carry out capital punishment. Well, again, that requires a set of societal agreements, standards. We're losing that in America. We have medical people talking about killing Jews, killing ICE people. We have medical professionals saying, I don't want to treat MAGA people. We have people wanting to eliminate the life of police officers. We have people that have been in our military saying things they shouldn't be saying about the American people. We have things going on in this country that now, as we've said, involve people from other countries who are getting a badge and a gun, and they come from some of the most corrupt countries in the world. I mean, I'm not, again, trying to be doom and gloom, but I'm trying to warn my audience. And I guess my question is, in closing, is this about all we can do is warn them that this system is approaching the end, whether it's 12 months or 24 months. And I was watching a financial report last night that was saying, I think it was Peter Schiff, they're expecting the cost of things to go 2 to 3 times higher. that as this system breaks and you move into the debasement of the currency, that everything, the cost of living is going to be 2 to 3 times higher. Well, how can most people can't afford it at the price it is now? How are you going to afford it at 2 to 3 times higher? And a man who has nothing left to lose has nothing left to lose. And at what point does crime explode and lawlessness become so great that just that in itself is overwhelming? So I guess I'm trying to say to people, the system is at its end. I don't know the time frame, but you better understand the realities. Your politicians are lying to you. If they don't know this, well, that's their fault. We know it. More than likely, they know it. And the system is set up to protect the system. So even if your local sheriff or local police department and local detectives and local prosecutors knows that your entire city and town is based on a financial Ponzi scheme sham, they're not going to say a word because their paycheck and pension is all based on that scam. The system protects itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it does, and it treats us as sort of the cows, the batteries, the fuel source in this story. And so, what do you do about it? Well, listen, I've been counseling the same things you have for a long time. I think people should be resilient, right? And that cuts across a lot of dimensions. But what it starts for me, Brandon, is if I can pull this up, I have a new offering. I've recast myself. I'm doing one big giant report each month. I call it the Renaissance Report. And it's right in line. This is why I could talk about all this so off the top of my tongue, because this one is my first volume is about, well, when money dies. And I think people, Brandon, need to understand why that might happen. Because if you understand like the context, then you're not just sort of like, it's all this random stuff. I don't know what's happening. You need to understand how our system of money is put together. And that's the foundation. And once you understand how it's put together, you come to my understanding, which is, look, it can't continue forever, regardless of fraud and deceit and bad people and demons and all that stuff. It has a math problem built into it. And we're running out of runway to pretend the math problem isn't there. Rich people have started to figure this out, right? Not that there's anything better about rich people, but I'm talking fairly financially sophisticated people. You got Ray Dalio saying, hey, I think all fiat currencies are in trouble here. You've got all kinds of like Templeton, all these people, like the people who've like been in the finance business for a long time are going, this is bad.
Warren Buffett said that one of his greatest fears has always been the debasement of currencies.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And debasement, the old Roman term, they would take real silver and put base metals in it, right? Lead. So debasement, right? So, but now they can just click it up. Like they can debase at the speed of light now. So it won't take Romanesque amounts of time for this to sort of play out. And that's what the concern is. So what do you do? So A, you understand what the context is. B, you got to start making new decisions, right? So
if I had bonds and stuff, I would start selling my bonds. I'd start getting rid of my bonds. I don't get financial advice, I get financial opinion, but I'd start getting out of these 401ks, which I never got into one at 19 years old. Someone tried to get me into one. I said, no, I just got done. Maybe, I don't know, it was 19, how old I was, but I was probably 19 or 20. But I realized that those were basically paper IOUs, and I didn't want to do that. Defer your taxes. I think taxes will probably be more expensive in the future now. I'd rather pay my taxes, take what I have now, and put it into hard assets. I've never owned a stock in my life. I've always been a hard asset guy, and investing in my own organization and studio and equipment and everything. You've been here, you see what we've done. So I've never done all that. And I don't get financial advice, I get financial opinion. But I wouldn't be holding these 401ks. I wouldn't be holding all of these paper IRAs. I wouldn't be holding all this. These are all promises to pay. I'd be getting out of that stuff now, because when people run for the exits, it's unfortunate, and the building's on fire, a bunch of them are going to be piled up with dead bodies at the door.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And again, I don't give advice. I give financial education. But there will come a time, I think Mike Maloney is correct. Silver will become unobtainium and gold will become unaffordium, right? So you won't be able to get your hands on it, or you won't be able to afford it. And that's the whole point, is that I am seeing the world's financial elites are piling into gold. a little bit lesser extent, but also silver, but platinum, palladium, other things, whatever they can get their hands on, because they are realizing that this reset is coming at some point. Does it come this year, next year, or a couple of years? Hard to say. But I believe that they understand what I've known for a long time, and I think you know as well. They used to say possession is 9/10 of the law. I think possession is 10/10 of the law. I think if you don't own it and you don't hold it, you don't own it.
And so think you think your dividend is going to show up in your bank account to spend or the check in the mailbox. Good luck. And by the time they've done that, it's been so debased it won't buy you a Snickers bar anyway. So again, I don't give financial advice, I give financial opinion, but people better hear what we're saying, because you're trusting in a system that's built on fraud. That's all I can say. I believe from my heart of hearts, everything is based on fraud today. The foundation is fraudulent. True? Is that an overstatement?
Yeah, it's just, I haven't dug into it, so I'll get the numbers a little wrong, but I just found out that LA County has fewer old people than all of Florida, but somehow had billed out 6 times as much as Florida, or some number like that, for hospice care.
18% of the health care is coming out of one county, LA.
Yep. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And how is that not immediately resulting in arrests and handcuffs and perp walks? Well, you know as well as I do, the people who've been running that are in the protected class, and that's where things start to really break down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we can't even get the Republicans to pass the SAVE Act. It shows that you are a registered citizen with an ID to be able to vote, because the whole system is, again, based on scams.
Well, in Senator Toon's defense, only 83% of Americans want it.
Only 83%. Yeah. Well, there it is. If you want to get his report, sign up for it. The Renaissance Report. It's now out, Volume 1. Check it all out at peakprosperity.com, peakprosperity.com. We always enjoy our visits. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure's been mine.
Great interview, guys. We'll be right back after this break. The dollar is dying. It's going down, and inflation is soaring. Are you prepared to lose through inflation your life saving, your purchasing power? I don't think you have to. I would urge you to go right now to worldviewgold.com. Worldviewgold.com. Get the free packet of information available, because you know what? I've been working with this company for about 17 years, and I trust them. Now, look, I don't give financial advice. I give financial opinion. And my opinion is you should do your own homework and your own due diligence. And I think that starts with getting the free, no obligation packet of information on how to put gold into your IRA, how to acquire physical gold or silver, or what is known as numismatic, 1933 and older. Education is crucial, and it starts with this free packet at worldviewgold.com, worldviewgold.com, or 1-877-864-1072, 1-877-864-1072, worldviewgold.com.